When it comes to some of the comic book media that's been released over the past decade and a bit, one of the most compelling and praiseworthy pieces has been Netflix's Daredevil, one of the first entries in the MCU that showed a more brutal and down-to-earth setting in the MCU, focusing on drug trafficking, people being murdered to uphold conspiracies, the consequences of vigilantism, and the sheer uncensored bloodiness of people fighting on the ground level, with the show's stapled hallway fights being as brutal as they are well shot. Now, I would say for the most part that the series has been pretty much amazing. It had a few issues, especially with season 2 being split between the Punisher stuff and the Hand and Elektra stuff, as they were trying to set up the Punisher show and the Defenders show, and as such it was a little disjointed, but seasons 1 and 3 are definitely some of the best pieces of media released in the recent years, being great blends of action, character drama, and courtroom drama, with sprinkles of comedy and romance throughout. People thought that after Netflix got pissy about Disney having its own streaming service and refusing to make more content with them, that we might never get any more Daredevil content again. But over the years, the rights to the shows have been returned to Disney, and with them launching their own TV shows, the opportunities to bring these characters back has become more accessible, with Matt and Fisk returning for several different projects before returning for this new show, Daredevil Born Again. Unfortunately, if you're someone with functioning eyes and ears, then you might have noticed that ever since Disney Plus launched and Marvel started pumping out 5, 6, 7 projects a year, the qualities of these pieces of media has gone down drastically, failing not just from a production aspect, but the writing also failing to be compatible with other projects that appeared before it, with the writers and overview being so bad that one piece of media will establish a rule of the world building, only for another release shortly after to completely contradict it, sometimes these two pieces being written by the exact same person. This has been a problem going on for a while now, but I think the reason why Daredevil Born Again suffers so badly from it is that it's basically two different shows that have been smashed together. The show was originally written without even thinking about the original show, with Matt and Fisk being the only two characters to return, with every single other character and plotline that came before it being irrelevant to this show, being a sort of soft reboot for the characters. Somehow, despite greenlighting this project in the first place, Kevin Feige and the other Marvel executives apparently weren't happy with what was made, and ordered reshoots that were so extensive that a good chunk of the show was stripped out and replaced with new scenes and storylines. So now we have a show where two pieces of world building will smash into each other, leaving the viewer trying to establish which one is canon. Characters will just do stuff that blatantly don't mesh with who they are, and in one scene you'll have writing that's just as good, maybe it's even better than the Netflix shows, only to put that next to some of the dumbest writing I've seen in a while, making this show a Frankensteined monster of some of the best and worst the MCU has to offer. Before we get into the different parts of the story for this season, let me just say that there's a lot of stuff here from a visual standpoint that's good, and even though sometimes the fight scene choreography and the cinematography aren't up to par, for the most part they're acceptable, and there's even some really good fights and scenes that I could really appreciate. And the acting is pretty good. If I have a problem with these characters, it's more to do with the way they're written over how the actors portray them. The one thing that's consistently not good is the pacing, but considering that a lot of episodes were cut down and there's a lot of reshot stuff, this is to be expected. Also, my goal here isn't to do full reviews on these episodes, there's plenty of channels out there that are doing just that. It's more just to highlight some of the biggest aspects of this show and things that I found interesting, and basically state why I don't think this has been well made. But before we talk about the Blind Man show, do you guys wish you could just close your eyes and not have to worry about any lights disturbing your sleep? Well, thanks to Manta Sleep, that can be a reality. Manta Sleep offer a wider range of products designed to help you sleep more comfortable in your bed. Whether it be sleep masks, sleep mask accessories, or even earplugs, Manta Sleep has plenty to offer in order to get you your perfect good night's sleep. I've had quite a few insomnia problems over the years, and while it has gotten better, I still struggle to sleep. And recently, Manta Sleep were kind enough to send me a sleep mask to give it a try. And I'm more than happy to say that for me, someone who's very picky about stuff, it works. So if you would like to check out some of their sleeping accessories and get a cheeky 10% off, make sure to use my code at their shop. The opening scene has one of the darkest moments in the MCU, at least from an audience standpoint, featuring Bullseye slowly killing his way through innocent people to try and kill Foggy and Karen. And despite doing what he can, Matt is unable to save Foggy's life, throwing Bullseye from the roof out of grief over his best friend's death, nearly causing him to break his no-kill rule, and so he gives up the mantle of Daredevil. This scene itself should be a gut-wrenching and heartfelt moment for me, but it's just frustrating because it feels like a moment just included to justify why everything is so different for most of the show. The original version of the show didn't include Karen, Foggy, Punisher or Bullseye, so they have to find a reason to remove them for the main story of the show to work. So they decided to rush Foggy into the grave and cause Karen to drift apart from grief, with Bullseye being sent to prison and Frank's just in the underground doing his own thing. It's a mostly good scene, but having it take place here just to justify the show is just bollocks. And it also isn't helped by the complete lack of context surrounding any of this, or the weird CGI landscape parkour shots that just look like complete shit. This episode ends with Wilson Fisk becoming the mayor of New York, and I don't think it takes a genius to understand why this doesn't work in any conceivable way. Even before the show was reworked, Fisk tried to have an Avenger killed, and people would surely know his involvement with what happened during the events of the show thanks to the arrest of Eleanor Bishop, events that involved the deaths of multiple people and warfare in the streets of New York. But now you have to add on to the events of the Netflix show as well, including murder, blackmail, extortion, the smuggling of drugs, the smuggling of people, attempting to take over the FBI and being responsible for the deaths of many of its members, on top of recruiting an unhinged psychopath that launched terror attacks all over the place that killed plenty of people. They still haven't explained why this guy's out of prison, never mind why in their right mind they would be able to successfully run for mayor of New York.
You will go back to prison, and you will live the rest of your miserable life in a cage. I'm not gonna spar with you, Murdoch.
No, I wasn't asking you to.
And before you all bring up the Trump analogy, yeah, Trump might be a dickhead, but last time I checked, he wasn't one of the biggest criminals in US history that slaughtered hundreds of people and committed multiple acts of domestic terrorism. Another thing that bothers me about Fisk's appearance here is how stunningly unprepared and inept he is as the mayor of New York. Fisk knows what it means to run an empire, how even the simplest of tasks can be a lot more difficult to run than they seem, and he most certainly understands the importance of patience and timing. Then you have shit like this.
Filling a hole like this, it's not rocket science.
You're telling me that Wilson fucking Fisk doesn't understand that you can't just magically make concrete appear out of thin air and then just blindly dump it in an area with pipes that control the water, electricity and sewage? This is not something Fisk needs to learn. He should know all this already. The White Tiger subplot is all over the place in many different ways. For instance, at the end of episode 2, Matt fights some corrupt cops that are attempting to get a witness called Torres, and Matt absolutely beats the crap out of them. He snaps their arms, he smashes them so hard the skin rips and blood gets everywhere, and towards the end he hits one of them so hard he lands on his head, and you hear what sounds like bone snapping, and then he just shows up in the next episode with a few bruises on his face and absolutely no problems whatsoever. I always thought that someone getting their neck snapped was pretty serious business, but this episode just proves me wrong, I guess. Matt also goes out of his way to deliberately endanger someone's personal life by revealing Hector's secret identity to the jury and everyone else in the courtroom. I mean, he already messed it up by revealing it to the judge, but at least you can assume the judge would keep the secret in order to make sure that the case holds up. But here he just pulls this to try and justify winning the court case, completely ignoring the massive ramifications this could have on Hector and his family. And surprise surprise, he gets shot at the end of the episode by corrupt cops who know who he is, in a really awkward death scene where this trained vigilante has absolutely no reaction to a guy walking up to him and cocking a gun to his head. If only there was a recent experience that Matt might have had that made him realise what a terrible idea it is for people to know your secret identity. Episode 4 wins the most schizophrenic levels of writing award by having one of the best scenes I've ever seen in one of these shows and one of the worst. We see Matt trying to represent his client, a guy called Leroy who was caught stealing and then imprisoned, and throughout this whole scene he's an unbearable asshole who takes no responsibility for his actions and insists the system is at fault, choosing to lock him up instead of feed him. And if you thought that very preachy scene focusing on societal commentary in a Disney show would be bad, then you are absolutely right, because it is. It is trying to make a statement about how the system unfairly punishes people and will pay more money to punish them than help them, but it doesn't work in this case because 1, this guy is a complete ass and does absolutely nothing to help himself, throwing a pity party over his actions while mocking and belittling the guy who's trying to help him. And 2, the reason he was starving was because he didn't have any food stamps. And why didn't he have any food stamps? Because he got arrested before as well.
20 25 pages of offenses, drugs, trespassing, panhandling, petty larceny.
Leroy broke the law, refused to learn his lesson, broke the law again when his food stamps got removed, and then broke it again and got arrested for breaking his parole. And I'm supposed to feel sorry for someone who refused to take any accountability for his actions? Fuck right off. And then the episode gives you fucking quality whiplash, because after dealing with that poorly written, low quality bullshit subplot, Matt meets up with Frank to try and figure out what he knows about the bullet used to kill Hector that has his symbol engraved on it, and it's one of the most beautiful, well-written scenes that these shows have ever produced. I don't know what it is, but you can just put Charlie Cox and John Bernthal in a scene together and I'm just instantly encapsulated by it. And this scene is no exception, with the love-hate relationship between the two being on full display here. The only complaint I have is the part where Frank talks about how Bullseye is eating his slop, with his line very clearly being ADR, with the pitch and echo being different compared to the rest of the scene.
Christ! So what now? Every day Bullseye goes to the chow hall, eats his slop.
But besides that, it's a really terrific scene, and I can't believe you have this absolutely superb scene in the same episode as this absolutely lowest of the low trash. Episode 5 was average, I guess. The plot was easy to follow, but two things that annoyed me was the fact that they made sure to shove Miss Marvel Funko Pops in people's faces, with her dad trying to show a blind man just so the camera has an excuse to focus on it for several minutes. And the police in this episode are genuinely fucking incompetent. I understand that they don't have many resources because there's an event going on, but charging into a bank in the middle of negotiations when you have very little information is pretty stupid. On to episode 6, Angela gets annoyed at Matt for apparently not doing anything to help Hector's death, and in some really unnatural sounding dialogue calls him a phony who only pretends to care about the little guy. And I'm just thinking, what the fuck are you on about? Matt stood up for her uncle and taking on the entire police force in both a physical and legal sense, and won for him. He also isn't a detective and he isn't currently in charge of her case, so I don't know what she expects him to do when he has the same information that she has. And all of this is made worse by the fact that Matt just fucking sits there and takes it instead of pointing out all the very obvious counter arguments. Matt's reasoning for finally putting the suit on is also very dog shit. Cherry, one of his new pals on the show who knows his secret identity, basically tells him, hey, there's this new serial killer on the streets and I really don't want you to do vigilante stuff, so please don't do any of that. And I've got no clue why he does this. Surely there's been plenty of crime happening in New York recently. I get that a serial killer is a bit different, but at the same time Matt has refused to be Daredevil of his own volition. Why Cherry chooses to dangle this issue in front of him and give him a lecture when that's obviously going to rev him up is just so bizarre to me. The fact that this is what kicks him off to being Daredevil again feels like such a cop-out to get Daredevil action going. Fisk also gets talked down by his backers who basically call him their bitch and he just accepts it. Remember when he was in charge and able to intimidate people who absolutely despise him into doing his bidding? Because the writers don't. I do like what they did with the fight scenes in this episode, showing both the protagonist and antagonist embracing their more violent natures and cutting between the two. But one thing I hated was the fact that Matt just allows himself to get hit several times when there's a person's life in danger. Last time I checked, getting repeatedly kicked in the head can be pretty damaging to you, as well as the fact that it just wastes time letting it happen. So the fact he just stands there and lets it happen while someone is being drained off their blood comes across as very out of character. He also manages to bring her back to life with CPR, which, ignoring the fact that CPR itself has a very low chance of doing this even on a healthy person, he does this on someone who's had enough of their blood drained that they died from it, and she's just completely fine with any of her blood going back in. Wouldn't she just flatline again because, you know, she has no blood? Episode 7 now, and Vanessa finally seems to do something interesting besides just floating around her cooked husband, helping Fisk in eliminating one of his pissed off lieutenants that wants to kill him. We also learn that Muse is actually one of Heather's therapy clients, meaning that now she personally knows Matt, Fisk, Vanessa, and Muse. Seems pretty unbelievable for one person to just run into all these people, but whatever. Muse is just killed off. He was talked up as quite a big threat in the marketing material, and then he's just killed at the end of this episode with like 10 minutes of screen time. He shows up, we're told he's a menace who killed over 60 people. We see him kill 2 people. He fails to kill Angela even though realistically she should have died of blood loss, and then fails to kill Heather before dying. Just feels pretty pointless having him in. Episode 8 starts and Heather immediately becomes a dumbass, saying that she's saved herself from Muse despite the fact that she obviously fucking didn't. There's also a lot of talk about going against vigilantes and how they operate, and that's been one of the main things throughout this show. But I mean, it's pretty public knowledge that heroes who have worked outside the law and government, like Iron Man, Spider-Man, Daredevil, Doctor Strange, Thor, all these people have helped around New York and even saved half the universe. Because let's be honest, a vigilante is someone who takes the law into their own hands, and all these motherfuckers have definitely done that. So I don't understand why there's such a heavy emphasis against it. They also bring up this quote saying that vigilante crime is down by 30%, which I'm not exactly sure how you measure that. But if you're going to add this to the world building, could you not have just shown us some scenes of the task force actually doing something that would make that number mean anything? Throughout this show, he just talks about the task force and how he's getting a task force together, and then they just don't really do anything. And then we have Dex come back, and it feels like they've just started to continue the plot from the first 15 minutes of the first episode, with everything else getting sidelined. They make a big deal about how he needs all these guards to be watching him, and then he's just sent to the dentist with one guard. And then he somehow escapes from the entire prison by killing this one guard, stealing his uniform, and then he just walks out and gets a big ass rifle snuck into a mayoral event, when you know damn sure that Fisk isn't stupid enough to not have this place crawling with security, before firing one shot that isn't anywhere near anyone's head. Everyone to do with the Dex stuff in this episode is a dumbass, especially the guy who calls himself Bullseye, who fails to get a bullseye on a stationary target. Matt also leaps in the way of a bullet for Fisk, and ignoring the fact that Matt wants Fisk gone, have we just forgotten about Fisk having Kevlar jackets? I'm pretty sure he would be fine if Dex shot him in the jacket, and Matt knows about these jackets as well, so he threw himself in the way for nothing, I guess. I don't know, it comes across as very disjointed. This could have been quite a good plot line if they had actually focused on that originally, but it's just kind of inserted in as like an afterthought. In the final episode, it's revealed that Foggy was killed because he and his client knew some stuff that would damage Vanessa and Fisk's reputation, so Vanessa hired Dex to break out and kill them. Two problems with this. Remember this threat?
And you won't harm Karen Page or Froggy Nelson, because if you do, I will go after your wife, and I will prove Vanessa ordered the murder of Agent Ray and Theme.
She wants to cover up this problem and in the process possibly piss Matt off to release evidence about her involvement in someone else's murder. I mean, he should have released this already considering Fisk refused to stay in prison, but he would definitely do it here, right? Secondly, he wants to kill her as well. He wants Fisk to suffer for what happened to him, and killing Vanessa would be the best way to do that. That was literally the final part of the last episode of season 3. Why would she risk even being in the same room as him, considering what happened last time? Why would she believe that she could trust him? There was also a lot of good dynamics in this episode, especially Matt really not wanting Frank to be the person in his corner, but having to rely on him and his methods in order to survive. And yeah, it was good having Karen back. It made sense that Frank would know everything from her in order to help Matt. And just as I complimented Charlie and John in their previous scene, having Charlie, John and Deborah in the same room is just a blast. There's a lot of chemistry going on. Obviously these guys have all been together during season 2 of the original show, but seeing them here after they've had a lot more development in their roles just makes it all the more better in my opinion. One big thing about this episode is that it's desperately trying to fill people in on everything surrounding the first 15 minutes of the show, and as such there's a lot of heavy exposition dumping going on and everything moving around quite quickly. However, because of everything going on around them and all the martial law stuff that's occurring, it doesn't feel too bad. The fast pace makes sense, I just wish that this Red Hook plotline had a little bit more room to grow and develop. And to be honest, the final episode really wasn't too bad for me. It felt rushed, sure, but it made sense, and you could tell that while all the previous episodes felt disjointed, they at least put enough breadcrumbs throughout that by the time this episode came around, all of the pieces sort of fit together, and it seems that they have a very clear direction of where the next season is going to go at the very least. Overall, Daredevil Born Again started off confusing, wallowed in mediocrity throughout most of its runtime, and then towards the end finally started to shift not only towards being coherent, but quality as well. And as such, I struggle to decide whether it's good or not. For the most part, it definitely feels like a show you just stick on to have something to watch in the background, but despite that, I am genuinely looking forward to season 2, having a more coherent set of writers and showrunners, alongside firmly establishing the characters and proper storylines. I think that will do wonders for it. Thanks for watching, lads and lasses. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing and checking out some of my other videos. Sharing always helps, and if you're feeling really generous, please consider my Patreon or YouTube membership. I also have a Twitter and occasionally I do live streams. But most of all, I just hope you had a great day and hopefully I will see you in the next video.